Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ready, Ted, Go. Let's Talk SEC Football podcast. It is Wednesday night, which means we're going to pick the SEC games for week eight, and talk about some mailbag questions and just talk SEC football. Man, it's just fun to talk SEC football. There's enough junk going on around the SEC that's not football related that we can talk about. So let's dive right in. I thought it would be cool tonight to definitely do some mailbag questions, do some throwback mailbag questions. I think that'd be cool to kind of see what this time this time a few weeks earlier we were talking about as far as our mailbag questions and how I answered them, and if the answer is coming true or not. I don't know what you would say, a good prediction of it, something like that. But so we're gonna get into some mailbag questions. We're gonna try to predict these scores. I think right now I'm at 8 losses, so my goal is to be in double digits throughout the middle of the year. I'm not doing too well though. As of right now, mid-season, I'm due about 16 losses, so it's probably not that bad. I think I'm around 67 and 8. Not a bad record, I don't think, for SEC games. We're going to preview a couple of the games outside of the SEC tonight. I think it's kind of cool because it has playoff implications. What's going on in the playoff world. So it's going to be a fun night. If you haven't already done it, please go like Ready, Ted, Go. Coming to you live, looking at also trying to get Ready, Ted, Go on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for people to listen to it more. If you don't have time to hop on here but can put it on in your car, that's pretty incredible. A little plug here. I started a podcast that is now on Apple Music called Living Out Leadership. And it's really what I'm passionate about as well. This is a hobby, but I'm really passionate about leadership and living out leadership and what I've learned and how I've grown around learning to lead, and the people that have come into my life that have just been impactful as far as how to lead. Everything's based off the world not having a people problem, but a leader problem. It's definitely activating our leadership daily, knowing what to do, when to do it, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in ministry, whether it's in your home life, whether it's just in your personal development and growth and what you want to do. So if you want to go drop a like, that is on Apple Podcasts, Living Out Leadership. Episode 1 is up. The first episode is called Burnout. Trying not to burn out, but to live it out. So it was a really cool. I was able to do it with my brother, Mike, who is a very influential leader in the community up in the Auburn, Alabama area. And so we got together, did that first episode podcast together, which you can follow that at Living Out Leadership on Facebook, Living Out Leadership on Instagram, and on the YouTube channel. If you go follow, like it. It is on Apple Podcasts right now. So a little plug, it dropped today. So also looking at how to get it on Spotify, and also to look at Ready, Ted, Go and get it going on all platforms as well. This has been something that's really fun. If you guys have followed with me, I've been doing this for about 8 or 9 weeks now. I actually went back and I watched the first 2 episodes where we previewed the East and the SEC, and we previewed the West. And I went back and looked, and we are kind of close to the predictions. So I don't know if I'm just a Vegas guy. I actually know what I'm talking about on here. Who knows? But it doesn't matter, because it's fun. It's fun to do. It's fun to connect. But go drop a like, go drop a follow, share these things. If you're looking at, if you're in the workplace, if you're in ministry, if you're just trying to lead yourself better daily and developing. Believe me, I don't know it all, but if you want to just follow a really good podcast for practical ways to take on leadership, leadership variances of things that go on in the day to day, go follow and like it. Listen to that first episode. I mean, even if you're not a quote unquote leader in the workplace or ministry, or everybody's trying to lead their life, right? So, burnout's happening. I mean, it's not a political podcast by any means, but, it's a day and age where right now there's a lot of things you can complain about and a lot of things that are causing us to burn out. And so really great episode 1 over there. So go follow it at Living Out Leadership on Apple Podcasts. But let's hop right in tonight. We're going to talk a few minutes about a couple of key games outside of the SEC this week that are going to affect the overall what is going on? The overall outcome, I think, of the Final Four playoff spots coming in. So obviously we know, we're going to hop into it in a minute, but we know Alabama, Tennessee is this weekend. Big game in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa. So definitely going to look at that. But I want to hop into a huge game happening this weekend with Ohio State and Penn State. Man, what a game. So that's a noon start. So these Big Ten games, I mean, I guess it's because the cold, maybe, but you don't get those 3:30 or night games like we're used to in the SEC sometimes for those big games. Like I know Alabama, Tennessee are playing at 3:30. We're gonna pick that game. I'll give you a little hint. It's not in Neyland, so I'm concerned. I'm concerned for Tennessee. But Penn State, Ohio State. So when you look at this game, it all comes down to Kyle McCord. Sorry, my iPad's jacking up right now. It all comes down to Kyle McCord and can Ohio State really continue? They've got a lot of injuries they're dealing with. I know Travion Henderson was out last week. Apparently he was held out kind of purposely. I know wide receiver for Ohio State was out. Is it Njigma? I think it is his name. Sorry, technical difficulties tonight. We just need to get things to work when we need them to work. But when you look at the impacts of that, and then you look at Penn State, who, my opinion, Penn State's weird because James Franklin, when you look at James Franklin was at Vanderbilt for a while, and I think he made his kind of splash to be able to get the job at Penn State after being at Vanderbilt and taking Vanderbilt to where they went. They knocked off a few teams while he was at Vanderbilt, and I don't think his landing spot was ever going to be Vanderbilt for a long time. But when you look at things and you look at how they've landed with Penn State right now, I mean, Penn State has always been with Franklin a really, really good team. It just feels like they always are right there, and they can't win. They can't win against Michigan, and they can't win against Ohio State. And so that affects the playoff tree tremendously, because if you add Penn State to this and you look at Penn State and Ohio State, this is a key game because I don't think you're going to see a Big Ten team that's going to come out of the Big Ten. I mean, yeah, there's a Big Ten championship, but it's really going to be hard because the mailbag question we're going to go back to is, do 2 SEC teams get in this year? We answered that at the beginning of the year. We're going to answer again tonight to see if it's still true. But I still think that, definitely 2 Big Ten teams don't get in. When you look at Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, maybe, but they all beat up on each other. And yes, it may come down to, the Big Ten championship, but one of those teams is going to have a loss, I think. So I really don't know what to say. I will say that, both teams are very equal. I do think this year, Penn State may have the edge a little bit on the defensive front rather than Ohio State. Ohio State hasn't played anybody, in my opinion. They just haven't. I mean, you can't argue this. You can't. I mean, people can, hold on, I'm turning this music down. People can argue all day long about it, the fact if Georgia's played anybody, but yet all of a sudden, now here comes Georgia and they have a gauntlet. I mean, you can say it. So, I mean, they're playing Florida coming up. So Florida right now is second in the SEC East. They beat Tennessee, who when I called at the beginning of the year, I had Florida right above Vanderbilt. Do they finish there? Maybe. I don't know. It's all going to depend on where what Kentucky does. They have a really hard schedule left as well. However, Florida, do they look like they're, the 3-1 record they are in the SEC right now, the SEC? Maybe. I mean, they didn't look great against Kentucky. But they've handled business everywhere else. They get into the meat of their schedule as well coming up. But you can argue to say Florida's already played a little meat because they played Kentucky and they played Tennessee, and they're 1-1 against those two teams. And I do think that Tennessee is a much better team than Kentucky. So I don't really know who Florida is. Is the Florida that played Kentucky going to show up? I don't want to get too far off track, but I will say when you look at all of these teams, I do think Florida can be right up there with a Penn State. I don't know about Michigan. I would say Ohio State right now because you don't. I mean, that's not the same quarterback back there for Ohio State as they've had in the past. I would say 4 to 5 years with Justin Fields and the kid from the Houston Texans. I forget his name, but he played really well against Georgia last year. But I just don't see. I mean, there's flashes with McCord, but he hasn't lived up to that name yet, and maybe that's year 2 for him. I don't really know. This is going to be an incredible game. Number one, because it's a 12 o'clock game, but Big Ten games they're used to playing at noon. You know, they're kind of used to it. For them, I would say playing up north, I think they do it because of the cold weather. So I think that, you know, they're kind of used to that, but it's going to be a game because I think the winner of this game, you know, it's going to go a lot to determining who's going to win the Big Ten, because I do think Michigan can beat both of these teams. But I think when it comes down to it, you're going to see the strengths and weaknesses of who's going to play. I mean, Ohio State and Michigan, is this the year? I mean, is this it? I would say they have less this year to go up against a team, Michigan, that doesn't look much different than last year. If anything, they look a little better than last year, maybe a little more grounded than last year. They're strong. I think Michigan's a stronger team than last year. So I don't think Ohio State beats Michigan this year. So is it Penn State? I don't know. I'm not calling this game, like I'm not predicting this game, but I would say if this is the year that Penn State beats Ohio State, it could be this year, because I think Ohio State is not as good as they were in years past. So I think that, yeah, you have Marvin Harrison Jr., Travion Henderson's banged up. I don't know. I don't see it happening. I'm calling it's at Ohio State. It's noon. They're gonna have to get into it quick, but I'm saying Penn State excuse me, wins that game. And then the other big game outside of that game that's going to affect that in my opinion is going to affect the college football playoff is Duke at Florida State. And, you know, Duke right now has that one loss to Notre Dame, but I think this Duke team has always presented a lot of problems for Florida State. Florida State is known for having to get past a couple of hurdles and not play up to par. And I think this Duke team is a middle of the pack Duke team. Obviously, they're ranked 16th. They're ranked in their middle of the pack. But I think this is a Duke team that's very dangerous because of Elko and that Duke defense. And I think Florida State cannot sleepwalk through this game on offense. I think Travis and those big receivers and the run game's going to have to be there. That they're going to have to control some clock. They're going to have to do some damage on defense. The only thing I would say is Duke's starting quarterback is not in there, out for the season. So I would say that if he was there, this game would be closer than expected. Do I think Florida State will win? Florida State's one of my picks to finish in the top 4. I think Florida State wins, but I think it's a key game because Duke has a great defense. They have a really good defense, and if Florida State sleepwalks, it could pose trouble. So those are two big games outside of the SEC that has playoff contention written on it, that Duke can really. And you got to watch out, because you got to wonder if Duke beats Florida State. Clemson is a team that's just, yeah, they're hanging around, but I don't think they get in this year. And so you got to go. I mean, North Carolina looks pretty good. North Carolina looks really good, but as far as the battle tested piece in North Carolina, it's coming. I mean, North Carolina's 6-0. I don't see a lot of. Let me pull up North Carolina's schedule for the rest of the year, and I can tell you kind of what that looks like, because I haven't really looked at this close. So they're at Virginia. They got Virginia, Georgia Tech, Campbell's a win, Duke, Clemson, NC State. So they finish out the year pretty strong as far as the ACC is concerned. I think NC State's a win. I think Clemson's a win, and Duke. So it looks like that carousel in the SEC in the East and the West, where you have Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, and then you have Alabama, and then you have Ole Miss, and you have LSU. I think the carousel in the ACC and the Big Ten, that 3-team carousel looks like In the Big Ten, you look at Ohio State, you look at Penn State, you look at Michigan, and then in the ACC, you look at Duke, and um, you look at Duke, North Carolina, and FSU. And Duke's lost one, but they haven't lost one, in my opinion. When you look at that Notre Dame game and you go back and look at that game, man, it's weird because that game was totally winnable, in my opinion, and it just it was like just a lack of offense. I think if I remember back, it was a messy game. In all said. But let's really quick. Let's hop into these mailbag questions. I'm really wanting to hop into these mailbag questions because I did a flashback, right? So it was, if I go back, it was week 2 SEC picks. I was 15-0 in picks, and this is where I went downhill with a couple of picks. I think I had 2 losses this week. But some of my mailbag questions are very interesting, and I thought, man, it'd be cool to go back and let's do some mailbag flashbacks. So on that week, one of my number one mailbag question on the list was, who will be the biggest disappointment team this year after their week 1 loss? And at that time, I had Clemson, TCU, or LSU. I do honestly think that Clemson has been a disappointment, but I can't really say they've like fallen off the face of the earth, right? I think that when you look at what collectively they've done at Clemson is they've not been the Clemson of old, but I would tell you that at the end of the day, it's Dabo Swinney, and Dabo Swinney is a great coach. I think he's in that gap year as far as they're 4-2 this year, 2-2 in the ACC. I mean, they're in that gap year as far as recruiting. I mean, was it Kublik? And they have a really good running back there too, but the defense is not the defense of old. Losses to Florida State and they lost to Duke. But their schedule lands pretty decent. They got Miami, NC State. Miami's wet the bed the last 2 weeks. Miami's just not well coached right now. They're just not. Mario Cristobal made the biggest bonehead decision ever in coaching when you're making millions of dollars, and you have people calling the plays and you have one job, and that's to be the executive decision of things that are going on the field, and he dropped the ball. And Miami has nothing to show for it right now, but a disappointing season. But you got Miami, that's a win. I think NC State's a win. They got Notre Dame, Tech, North Carolina. Clemson's got a tough schedule left, in my opinion. So if I'm looking at it correctly, and I'm going back, and I will, for just kicks and giggles, we will pull TCU really quick, just to kind of see kind of where we're at. But I do feel like that TCU is probably the biggest disappointment, I would say. LSU's out. I mean, LSU's in the hunt right now. I mean, LSU's got to play Alabama, and I think LSU, that head-to-head with Alabama, is gonna seal the West. Maybe because Ole Miss there's a tiebreaker. It will seal the West. Because it will come down to the tiebreaker, and they've all beat each other. But you look at TCU, they lost to West Virginia, they lost to Iowa State, they lost to Colorado, and they still have to play Kansas State. I think that's a loss. I think Texas is definitely a loss, and I think Oklahoma's a loss. So at the end of the day, TCU is going to probably end up having the most disappointing season after that start. The loss to Colorado. I mean, if you really want to add Colorado in there, I mean, they won some games. I think for Colorado, it was the hype of Deion Sanders and the hype of the fact that they've not won many games at all in the last few seasons. So coming out and beating the reigning Big 12 champion and the college football playoff runner up, there was a lot on that, so it looked like a bigger win than it was. And then you look at Colorado, and Colorado has completely wet the bed on a few games as well. Completely looked terrible going down 29-0 and losing that game last weekend. I mean, that's just wild. I mean, I cut that game off. I thought it was over. 26-0, I thought it was over. I definitely think TCU is the biggest disappointment out of those teams. LSU being the ones that have recovered the best. Did they look good against Ole Miss? No, but I do think they have the best offense I think they have the best offense in the West. And that's always going to trump everything. It's going to be interesting to see that Alabama defense go up against that LSU offense later on in the year. Second question: who will be the highest scoring offense out of Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia in the SEC this year? Right now, if we look at offenses, I think right now Ole Miss. Don't quote me on this one. I was ready for these questions, but I wasn't as ready as far as statistical stuff of that nature. So let's look it up. Let's see what these offenses look like on paper. But I'll tell you who looked the part. I really feel like Ole Miss looks the part. I could be wrong. I know I'm Carson Beck has been incredible so far, but right now, and I didn't include LSU, but I just told you LSU has an incredible offense. So it's looking like on paper that Georgia right now over Ole Miss, and even in rushing, I mean, I would say, yeah, I think even in when you look at complete leaders, I think it's Georgia right now on paper. But the reason I think offensively that Ole Miss doesn't get into this caption is because they put up a lot of points, but they didn't run the ball very well the first 3 games of the year. They could not find the run. Quinshon Junkins was held to like less than 50 yards rushing in the first 3 or 4 games. And so Georgia has continued to run the ball enough. And then when you look at the place of when you throw Tennessee in there, they've ran the ball incredibly well, but Joe Milton has been very just inaccurate and dependable. So when you look at those 3 on paper, I mean, Georgia's offense has been incredible this year and not a lot of mistakes by Carson Beck. And so when you look at that, I think at that time, I might have said Ole Miss back. I wish I would know what I picked that back then, but I think Ole Miss was what I picked. But right now, I think the highest scoring offense, it says scoring. It says scoring. I'll give it to you on that one. It does say scoring. I would say right now, scoring wise, it's Ole Miss. But I would say right now, as far as efficiency, out of those 3 teams, it's definitely Georgia right now. You're gonna figure out Tennessee's gonna play a really good defense this weekend in Alabama. So you're gonna figure out what Joe Milton's made of. This could be a defining quarterback. Is Joe Milton the guy going forward? He might have a little, hey, like this is what we're going to do going forward type deal because this is what Alabama did for Texas. They kind of tried to figure out was Milton the guy. They realized it's Milton or nobody. Let me grab some drink real quick. Sorry about that. So third question, does the SEC get 2 teams into the college football playoff this year? When we answered that the first time, I said no. I do think that might have changed a little bit. Why? Because of Texas. 2 things, because of Texas and because of Florida State. So I don't think the ACC gets 2 in. I don't think the Big Ten would have to have really tight games with those 3 teams we talked about earlier. Like I said, every Power 5 team has that 3-team jugular going on right now. I think the Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan 3 is probably the toughest 3 as far as conferences. That's why I'm still wondering, does the SEC get 2 teams in? Florida State has been everybody has Florida State, just going bonkers right now. And I like Florida State. I picked Florida State to win the ACC. The thing I don't like is how Florida State has sleptwalked through some teams this year. They've gone to Boston College and sleptwalked through that one. They just haven't looked like they have that cutting edge, like put you away mentality. Their defense has allowed a lot of points that I don't think when you look at an ACC defense, you go, well, you take that. However, when you get the ACC involved, it used to be Clemson and everybody else. And now it's like, it's North Carolina, it's Clemson. Clemson's got 2 losses, but who knows what could happen. It's Duke, it's North Carolina. You got a lot of players in there now. You got about 4 teams, and I'm including Clemson in that are still, I still look at and go, there's possibility there. Dabo is an incredible coach when it comes to, I mean, he's from the Nick Saban tree, so he will adjust. and they will shock the world. I think Clemson will shock the world with their endings. I think they're gonna grow up a lot. I think they have some tough games, but North Carolina's got to play Clemson, and I would have rather had Clemson at the beginning of the year this year than the end because they're going to figure some things out towards the end of the year. But you do have South Carolina at the end, and I mean South Carolina, that win versus Georgia, that South Carolina win that we had against South Carolina, it doesn't even add up now as far as help for Georgia because I mean the biggest thing that happened from this past weekend when they blew that game to Florida was Shane Beamer breaking his foot because he kicked a Gatorade container. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was one of his most exciting. Excuse me. It was one of his most exciting press conferences because he actually told a story about how he kicked the Gatorade cooler, broke his foot, and he laughed about it. And yeah, I don't know. They got problems in South Carolina. If this wasn't the year for Shane Beamer, I don't know, man. There's hot seat talks there. I think there's hot seat talks. We ain't hearing it yet, but there is. It might be a shocker towards the end of the year. Adam Fisher says they got lucky at Clemson. They did. They did. I think Duke, watch this game this weekend. Watch this Duke game, man. Mike Elko's defense at Duke. I don't know if they have the offense because they're down their quarterback, but Duke just likes to keep it messy. And I know we don't want to get too far in that because we're outside the SEC in this one, but I think it tells a lot to the SEC getting two teams in this year because if you look at Alabama sits outside of that and it goes, okay, so let's say an undefeated Bama and an undefeated Georgia meet in the SEC championship. And no, they're not undefeated in the as far as overall this year, but they'll both be undefeated in the SEC. Clearly this year, the most consistent conference, I think. The Big Ten you can say the Big Ten, but after those top three teams, there's not even really there's not a tussle down there below them. They're just bad below them. So I think if you have an Alabama and a Georgia, I do think two teams get in if Florida State loses one of these. Because I think Clemson is not in there. I think North Carolina. Does anybody think it's safe to put North Carolina in there? They're giving up so many points, and they're 6-0 right now. First 6-0 start, I think, was it school history or something like that? I think you get Alabama and Georgia in again. You don't like to hear, you don't want to hear Alabama sliding in or Georgia sliding in, but if Georgia's undefeated going into the SEC championship and Alabama is undefeated in the SEC and Georgia has not lost a game on paper and loses in a close game or just a 1 touchdown, 2 touchdown game to an Alabama, let's just say it happens, right? I think Georgia's in. I think Georgia's 100% in. I think you got Alabama. I think you got Georgia. I think you got the winner between. I'm calling the upset. So Penn State and Michigan. I think that's Michigan. I think Michigan. If Georgia were to lose that, I think whoever loses the SEC championship, if it's Georgia, if it's Bama, goes to the 3rd seed. And I think you see 3v1. So isn't that funny? Because if Georgia were to lose, they play Michigan again. And man, that would be incredible because that's 3 years in a row. And I don't know if Harbaugh can survive another Michigan Georgia loss first round of the college football playoff. Last year, the 14 playoff. And I think your 4th team in there has to be the Big 12. And I think, and you're probably going to be like, okay, where's the Pac-12 in this? Oregon lost to Washington. Unless Washington just wins out, it's between Washington and Texas would have had a loss. So I think Washington gets in. And don't quote me on this, but if you're telling me if Alabama loses, they are out. But if you're telling me a 1-loss Georgia team and by all means, there's a lot that can happen between now. Georgia has, I don't care what you say, they have a little bit of a gauntlet coming up with Florida, with Missouri, with Ole Miss and Tennessee. That's a gauntlet right there, a little four-game gauntlet. Thank goodness 3 out of the 4 of those games, one's at neutral site, 2's at home, and one's in Neyland. Neyland is going to be a hard one, but I don't think it's going to come down to a 1-loss Georgia team who went undefeated in the SEC to a 1-loss Texas team that won their championship. It's exactly why we're going to a 12 team next year. But I do think somehow Alabama and Georgia, if there is 2 teams that can possibly get in, if we're sitting there with possibilities, I don't think if if Georgia beats Alabama, I don't think that Alabama gets in. But I do think you got a lot to talk about if Georgia's undefeated and they lose a close game against Alabama. Now, we don't hope that happens, but it could. I'm just telling you scenarios, but that's the only way I think two SEC teams get in there. I think FSU has a couple games to scratch their head on right now. FSU's got to show they can finish. Ohio State has to show they can beat Michigan, and North Carolina's got to show they're real right now, right? And then Georgia has to show they can overcome an injury in the next 4 games. That is it's a bad injury, but I think Georgia's going to show you that. You know, nobody's going to. I think Kirby Smart said it the best. Nobody replaces Superman. He's not real, right? So like nobody's going to come in and be Brock Bowers, but man, just wait, man. These tight ends that are behind Brock Bowers, you know, the Oscar Delps, the Lawson Luckies, the Pierce Sperlins, these guys haven't had much time, but I've seen them and Adam, I know you can attest to this. I've seen them in the spring game this past year, and you know, you're playing against one of the top defenses in the country at the spring game, and Lawson Lucky had if Lawson Lucky doesn't have that same injury that Brock Bowers has now, Lawson Lucky they're finding a way to get him somewhere. I don't know if you get him in like a hybrid slot type position. Lawson Lucky, watch out. I'm telling you, I'm calling Lawson Lucky as, you know, Oscar Delp is Mr. Consistent. Um, you know, he reminds me of some consistent tight ends we've had in the past, nothing flashy at Georgia, but I think Lawson Lucky can be a Brock Bowers in the next few years. He has a really cool skill set. Fourth question, who is your top pick for Heisman after at that time it was 1, we're going week 8 now. I will tell you who I had on the list in week 4. It was Caleb Williams, Shedeur Sanders, and Brock Bowers. Now, tough sledding for Brock Bowers. I talked about it a little bit on Monday night. A lot of people are asking, there's so many things flying around about Brock right now. And, you know, people are like, he's not coming back. He's not going to suit up. He's not going to. The one thing that you heard Kirby say, the one thing you heard him say is that he hopes Brock does it right. He hopes Brock Bowers does it right. Now, I will tell you this. Brock Bowers thinks the world of Kirby Smart. A lot of those players do. I don't think there's one player in that room, whether they've had a run-in with Kirby or they don't see eye to eye, but they still respect him highly. And I do think that this has and we are in a day and age where NIL, you know, yeah, it's not millions and millions and millions of signing bonus dollars, but I don't know if you've read this Caleb Williams junk about this is so stupid, man. Like he's thinking about not going to the league because he can survive on NIL money, and he doesn't want to go to those top 5 teams because he doesn't want to be, you know, a failure his first year and have a terrible offensive line and a terrible team. And then I heard something about he wants stock in the team or stock. He wants part ownership in the team that he plays for. I'm hoping that's just bull crap, because if that's what's going on, that's where NIL is going. We have a lot to talk about, because it can do one or two things. If it can keep kids in school and not make them just jump towards money, that's great, because that means maybe we see Brock Bowers again next year. I have no idea. I'm not ruling that out. He's not dumb. He's a smart kid. He's a talented kid. He will play in the NFL regardless of if it's next year or the year after. It's still on the table if he comes back. I really think that. And I'm not being that crazy weird guy because it's like, oh my God, I love Brock Bowers. I do like Brock Bowers. I think Brock Bowers is an incredible talent. It's not just because he goes to Georgia. I think he's an incredible talent regardless. If he played for Florida State, I'd tell you he's an incredible talent. But I do think that if tightrope surgery takes 3 to 4, I think the earliest you see him back is Missouri, which is a Hail Mary. And the latest you see him back is Georgia Tech, and the like sweet spot is Tennessee. I think it's a given that you see him back if they make it to the SEC championship. I'm saying SEC championship, but I'm also saying if I know Brock Bowers, his mind is going Tennessee. His mind's going Tennessee. That's 4 weeks. We'll see. He's an animal. He's a workaholic. He will be in that training room. He will be crushing it. So we'll see. So unfortunately, right now, I have to exclude Brock Bowers due to the fact that he's going to miss a few weeks, and none of these other 2 players are. I take Shedeur Sanders out of there. I do not think he's a Heisman candidate. He never was. Everybody, I mean, he's thrown for a lot, but his character, man, doesn't say Heisman, and he's got a lot of growing up to do. Um, Adam Fisher, Penix all day since Brock got hurt. Penix, man, I wasn't too impressed with him against Oregon. And he was solid. I mean, I guess he was solid. Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams is out of it. I mean, but I don't know what the Heisman vote is anymore. Like, I don't know if it's a popularity contest. I don't know if it's actually stats. I don't know if it's good player with great record. I don't know what it is anymore, man. So Penix is definitely going to be up there. I think he definitely is top 2 right now. I think Caleb stays in the top 3, and I think you got Penix. I think you got Caleb Williams. I think if Brock didn't get hurt, Brock will be 3rd. I think who slides into that mix right there. Um, man, I think Harrison Jr. slides into that mix. He's been good this year, man, and his best games are to come. So Marvin Harrison Jr. could slide into that mix really easily, but I think it's a Penix and a Caleb Williams race right now. Question 5, just trying to get to the picks now. Which team started with the quarterback in week 1 but won't end? It's the SEC team start and compete to win the Division win the division in the SEC East or West. So I think I think my original answer to this says basically which quarterback is starting right now, but will not end the year starting, but will still contend to win their division. I thought it would be Jaden Daniels with Nussmeier. Jaden Daniels has been really, really good this year. The offense has been really incredible. If the defense can figure out just how to cut their loss in half right now, they'll win a lot of their games. They'll probably beat Bama. But I think if you look at week 1, um, I don't think Texas A&M can win their division. I don't think they can win their side. I would have said it might have been Bama. Um, Nobody, unless Tennessee. Um, I don't have the stats. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name at Tennessee. Starts with an N. Really highly recruited. Who knows? I mean, for all I know, they have this kid ready to go. Let me look this kid's name up because it's gonna drive me nuts. Adam Fisher, you know who it is? What's the kid's name from Tennessee, the quarterback? Let me look right here. Uh, Teams. I do think that my answer would be Tennessee, and if it's like if I don't know the kid's name. The kid's name. It's a long pause, man, on a mic. It really is. It's crazy. But I want to know this because also it's hard to pronounce. It's very hard to pronounce. I got you right here. Roster. Tennessee Volunteers. I watch a podcast called That SEC Podcast, and the guy's a Tennessee fan. And yeah, this guy's name, man. Here it comes. And of course, they give you this roster, man. That's just like nuts. Here we go. Nico. I'm gonna butcher this, man. Em, Em. Yeah, dude. How you pronounce it? Emalaya. Emalaya. I've heard some. Let's just say Nico. Let's just say Nico. Right. I've heard so many things about this kid, man. He's a 5-star recruit. Went to Tennessee. Heupel recruited him really hard. Um, I think it's Emalaya or something like that. Yeah, I probably ripped it up. Um, but this kid, if I would say my answer to that question would be Tennessee. And if Joe Milton, they've been running the ball really good. The Tennessee defense has been good. I would say if for some reason Milton can't do anything against Alabama, and this kid comes in and he takes over for the rest of the year, and they win the rest of their games. Tennessee beats Georgia, and it's head to head, and Tennessee goes instead of Georgia. That would be the person because I don't think it's Max Johnson at Texas A&M. I don't think there's anybody. Devin Leary, but they're not going to win the East. I mean, Devin Leary needs to be pulled. I don't know who's behind Devin Leary, but that kid needs to be pulled. Devin Leary's looked terrible this year. I said that on Monday. I'll continue to say that, and I back it. Kentucky's quarterback situation is horrendous. And we thought Devin Leary from NC State was, but it just goes to show you, man, you can't just pop in the SEC and just play quarterback, man. It's hard. It's very hard. And there's been a lot of people have been, including myself, have been ragging Jalen Milroe a little bit, but he's stepped up to the plate in the last few weeks. He's the reason why, when we pick him here in a minute, why you're going to be blown away that I pick it like this. But without any further ado, let's hop into the picks. Georgia, Florida off this weekend. So no Georgia, Florida in this weekend. But let's pick these games really quick. We got Mississippi State 3-3 on the road versus Arkansas. KJ Jefferson, the animal. KJ Jefferson, the wrestler. Like, what would KJ Jefferson's name be if he was a wrestler? Would it be like Jazzy Jefferson? I don't know, man. KJ, like, I don't know, man. KJ bringing the wood, KJ, or I don't know, man. The reason I say that is because the guy literally has an offensive line that will not block for him to save his life, and he's throwing players off of him so he can throw the ball. Like, these are grown defensive players that hit the weight room and that have a little weight on them, and he's throwing them off of them. Mississippi State, Arkansas. The line on it is 6 for Arkansas. Dude, Arkansas needs a win. They need a win. And I had Arkansas finishing ahead of Mississippi State. So I got to go Arkansas on this. I think KJ Jefferson finally gets a win. It's at home. It's a noon game. Mississippi State, they've not looked good this year. I think a lot of it, Will Rogers is not used to having his play card on a sticky note. Like my boy, the Pirate, long live the Pirate, Mike Leach, one of the best offensive minds ever in college football. Rest in peace, my man. But Arkansas gets the win. I think they cover. I think Mississippi State, I think it's a sloppy game. I think Arkansas needs this win. Sam Pittman needs this win. He can't go to 0-5, man. I mean, he could take if he goes 0-5 in the SEC, I mean, he might be the name that replaces my man Jimbo on the hot seat list. South Carolina at Missouri, 6-1 Missouri, 2-1 in the SEC, ranked 20th. South Carolina limping in there, literally. Shane Beamer limping in there with a broke foot from kicking a Gatorade cooler over. Great job. They were only a field goal away. Man, imagine if that cooler would have went through the uprights, they would have won the other night against Florida. But he tried to kick it with the cooler. Yeah, Missouri wins this game. Missouri wins this game big. It's at home. It's 3:30. It's Mizzou land. They believe this year. The offense is much improved. I do think Luther Burden last week didn't look as good. He's been nursing a little bit of injury. People need to understand that as bad as Brock is needed at Georgia per se, Luther Burden is a really big punch for Missouri. We need to see if he looks good, if he looks like he's good to go against South Carolina, because he's a weapon for them. And if he doesn't go and Schrader doesn't go, they don't go. It's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be tough against South Carolina. I think it will be tough the following week though against Georgia, or in 3 weeks, I should say. So I got Missouri in this one. It's 7 points. I think they cover easily on this game. I would be shocked if they didn't. It's going to take Beamer having both legs ready, and he's going to be hobbling around. I don't know if he's going to boot or what, but it's going to be pretty funny. They're going to be memeing that thing for a long, long time. Ole Miss ranked 13th, 5-1, 2-1 in SEC play. Their only loss to Alabama. Going into Auburn on the Plains, night game in Jordan Hare. Night game, Jordan Hare Stadium. Man, I wanted to root for Auburn so bad. My brother Mike, we got to hang out in Auburn a couple weeks back. Really good time. I love the area in Auburn, the southern hospitality from the tailgaters there. Got the Tiger Prowl tailgate. Got to sign the bus. Get to do to see the just I'm in the Auburn mix, man. And they played well against Georgia. They laid an egg on the road. They come back home, though. They come back home. Is this the Lane Kiffin, like, the oof? Like, is this the oof overlooking? Here's the funny thing. The line's only 6.5. The line is only 6.5. Auburn, Ole Miss. Here we go. You ready? Here we go. Auburn. I got Auburn in this game. I'm going to tell you why. It's a night game. It's home. They're pissed because they didn't show up against LSU. They played well at home against Georgia. This is Lane Kiffin's This is his 7 o'clock oops game. Um, I know they beat LSU and LSU destroyed Auburn, but I just got a niche for this one right here, right? Um, because I will tell you, if Auburn's going to get an offense going, it's going to need to be against these guys. It's their only chance. I got Auburn. I'm really wondering about this one because this kid. I'm trying to stay in single digits. I'm at 8 midway in the year, so if I lose 2, I'm already in double digits and I'm already past my record. 7:30 game. So I got Auburn in that one. Go Tigers. That's from my brother Mike. No, I'm not picking them because favoritism. I do think this poses a threat for Lane and the boys. It's a night game. It's Auburn. They need one, man. They're 0-3. They're desperate for that win. Somebody said today there hasn't been many upsets. There hasn't been many upsets in the SEC this year. Army LSU, 7:30 game in LSU. Do we even have to talk about it? LSU is a 31-point favorite. LSU easy at home. The starters are in. The starters are out after the quarter and a half. I would say Jalen Daniels. You'll see. You'll see what I'm saying with Nussmeier this weekend. He'll be in about the midway through the second. That kid's got an arm. He's got a really good arm. LSU. Yep. There you go. They're not going to play me in the starters because they got Alabama coming up. So yeah, and then Tennessee, Alabama, because Georgia and Florida are buys this weekend. So Alabama, Jalen Milroe and the boys. Listen to this, man. The line is Alabama 9 right now. I think that will come down to about Friday afternoon. It'll come down to about 7.5. I think if it comes down under 7, that would be an injury we don't know about. But Jalen Milroe on the road, 3:30 in Alabama. This is an Alabama win, guys. It's an Alabama win. It's Jalen Milroe. It's defense. This is where you got to figure out if Jalen Milroe, they're not going to be able to run the ball. Alabama does an incredible job. Nick Saban is going to take something away from you. He's going to take something away from you. Him and Kirby Smart are the same. Kirby got this from Nick. He's going to take something away from you. So it's whether it's running the ball, whether it's throwing the ball, whether it's going to be a little bit of a defensive grind. Tennessee's defense has looked really good. Milroe and them throwing the ball. He's got a great deep ball. He struggles a little bit, but they've gotten him in a little bit of an offensive thing where he's having more of quick throws. When quick throws, quick pitches, quick tosses, option type things, getting him out, letting him run a little bit, playing some yard ball, I call it. And yeah, I agree. Georgia needs Alabama to win. But here's my thing, man. I think if they didn't, I think Alabama wins this game, man. Alabama's defense is just too much. Just too much. And here's the big one. I'll fly this one out there, kind of like I flew the Auburn thing out there. Alabama still remembers the miracle at Neyland, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what they're calling it, but they still remember the Morgan Wallen Tennessee fan song. They're still remembering it, man. I mean, that place partied last year. I think Alabama remembers that game. I think Saban remembers that game. I think he's bulletin boarded material that game. He's bulletin boarded material. Everything from he's probably been playing Morgan Wallen in the locker room this week. I think Alabama wins at home. I think there's going to be some rowdy Alabama fans. And you see Alabama's defense. They're going to take away the run. They're going to take away the run and make Milroe beat them. And you may see Mr. Nico. I can't pronounce it. I'll go Mr. Nico. But you might see him. I don't know. I mean, Alabama's definitely not a game that they'll put him in and throw him into, but who knows? You might if Milroe looks bad enough because I feel like Nico can hand the ball off, But we'll see what Joe Milton's made out of, and Tennessee has a tough schedule ahead. As Georgia does too. SEC is right in their gauntlet, man. You're going to see Alabama play LSU. You're going to see Ole Miss play Georgia. You're going to see Tennessee play Georgia. You're going to see Ole Miss play. Ole Miss is really, Ole Miss has got Georgia, and then they're out of it kind of. But you still got to see Alabama play Auburn, and you still have to see those rivalries, and you got to see Alabama play Kentucky. So you still got a lot of stuff going on right now. This bye week for Georgia will tread some light on what's going on. Missouri, are they going to sleepwalk through their 3:30 game against South Carolina? South Carolina is due some miracles, I guess you would call it, but they're due to show up. So is this, I don't know, man. South Carolina's due to show up. Auburn's shown up against Georgia, but does the same, if the same Auburn team shows up, it's a night game in Jordan Hare, man. It's a night game. I don't know, man. I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna be watching that game. See if old Lane Train. Lane Train was supposed to go to Auburn too. His name was in that hat. There's so many rumors flying around there, but it's going to be a great weekend of SEC football. We're in the middle of the season. We're going to have a lot to talk about next weekend as we get into Georgia, Florida week. Both of them having buys. We got a lot of things previewing for next week. It's going to be an incredible weekend this weekend. But man, Georgia, Florida coming up, Tennessee, Kentucky coming up. I mean, it's going to be a great week next week as well. We're getting into the thick of the SEC schedule where it's going to basically play out for itself. As always, thanks for joining, Adam Fisher. Thanks for being the number one commenter and fan. We still need to get you on the show, man. Get you in here and instead of typing, man, get your opinion in here. Let your opinion be known, man. If y'all don't remember, I told this story. Adam Fisher took me to my first Georgia game, him and his mom and dad, and is a vital part in why I'm a huge Georgia fan right now. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I hope your SEC team wins. And I hope I'm stay at 8 losses. That would help out a lot. It's going to depend on Tennessee and Alabama and Auburn and Ole Miss they're not my lock. I think Alabama's my lock, but my upset is Auburn. War Eagle. That's my upset this week. So you guys have a great weekend. Go SEC football. Thanks for joining in. Make a share, make a like. Go over and check out Apple Podcasts, Living Out Leadership. You'll love it. Have a great night.